The first thing I learned about prison was that fear has its own sound. It isn't shouting or metal doors slamming or guards barking numbers instead of names. It's quieter than that. It sits in your chest and hums, steady and relentless, like your body already understands something your mind hasn't caught up to yet. That this isn't temporary. That this place doesn't care who you were before. I was more afraid of prison than I was of being alone, and somehow that felt like a weakness everyone around me could sense. The chains around my ankles rattled as they walked me down the tier. Men leaned halfway out of their cells, eyes sharp, curious, bored. Some smiled. Some didn't bother. I kept my gaze on the floor, replaying advice I'd heard too late. Don't stare. Don't react. Don't look scared. The door stopped in front of one cell and buzzed open. Step in. I did. He was already there, sitting on the lower bunk like he'd been expecting company. Mid-30s, maybe older. Solid in a quiet way. Dark hair cut close, jaw rough with stubble. He didn't size me up like the others had. He just looked up, met my eyes once, and nodded. You can take the top, he said. No edge. No challenge. Just a fact. Okay. I muttered, my voice thin and useless. The door slammed shut behind me, and the sound hit harder than anything else so far. Final. I climbed onto the top bunk because my legs didn't trust the floor anymore. My hands shook, so I folded them together and pressed them into my thighs until they ached. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. You knew, he said eventually. Yeah. How old? 21. He breathed out slowly, like he'd expected that answer. Name? Miles. Marcus, he said. I don't like noise. I don't like surprises. And I don't touch other people's stuff. I nodded too fast. I won't be a problem. That made him look up at me again. Really look. Something in his expression shifted. Not soft, exactly, but less sharp. Everyone's a problem their first week, he said. Just don't be a stupid one. The lights dimmed later, but my body didn't follow. The noise changed shape instead of disappearing. Coughing. Distant laughter. Someone crying down the tier, trying not to be heard. I lay on my back staring at the metal above me, counting breaths, counting seconds, counting everything except my thoughts. Being alone in here terrified me. Being invisible somehow felt worse. My breathing went shallow without asking permission. Panic slid in quietly, efficient and cold. I turned toward the wall, pressing my face into my sleeve, willing myself not to make a sound. You okay up there? Marcus asked, low and calm. Yeah, I lied. He waited a beat. You're not. I swallowed and stayed quiet. First night does that, he said. Your head starts inventing exits that don't exist. That landed harder than reassurance would have. He wasn't trying to make me feel better. He was just telling the truth. I've been down 12 years, he added. You won't break tonight. I focused on his voice instead of the walls, the bars, the weight of everything I couldn't undo. It was steady, unrushed, like he'd already survived the worst parts and didn't need to prove it. Slowly, my breathing evened out. The panic lost its grip and moved on to someone else. My muscles unclenched a little at a time. Marcus rolled onto his side, giving me space without making a point of it. The cell still felt small, but it no longer felt like it was closing in. Before sleep finally found me, a realization settled in, quiet and unexpected. I wasn't scared of him. I was scared of what it would have felt like if I'd ended up here with no one at all. And as the cell sank into its uneasy rhythm, I let myself believe that surviving this place might start with sharing it. Morning came without asking permission. The lights snapped on while my eyes were still closed, and for a split second I forgot where I was. Then the noise rushed back in, shouts down the tier, metal clanging, the sharp bark of guards. My stomach dropped as reality locked into place. Prison. Cell. Bars. Marcus was already awake, sitting on the edge of the lower bunk, pulling on his boots with the same unhurried precision he did everything else. Like mornings didn't mean anything special here. Like time itself had learned to move around him. You're going to want to move, he said without looking up. Why? My voice sounded wrecked. Count. Right on cue. A guard's voice thundered down the block. I scrambled off the top bunk, heart racing, and stood where Marcus gestured, back straight, eyes forward. I copied him exactly, terrified of doing the wrong thing. The count passed. The door stayed locked. My shoulders sagged in relief I hadn't realized I was holding. Breakfast was chaos. Lines, noise, bodies packed too close together. I stayed half a step behind Marcus, close enough that I could see the broad set of his shoulders, far enough not to look like I was clinging. Eyes followed us. Some curious, some calculating. "This where you stick with me," he said quietly. "Not an order, just a fact." I nodded. "Okay." We sat at a metal table bolted to the floor. My tray shook in my hands, watery eggs threatening to slosh over the edge. Marcus ate like none of it bothered him. Efficient. Calm. "You got paperwork?" he asked. "Yeah." "Keep it hidden. Don't tell anyone what you're in for unless you know them." I swallowed. "How long before I know people?" He glanced at me, then back to his food. "You don't rush that." The words settled heavy in my chest. Everything here felt like it ran on rules no one explained out loud. Back in the cell later, the noise dulled again, replaced by that low hum I was already starting to recognize. Marcus leaned against the wall, arms folded, watching the tear through the bars. "You scared?" he said. I opened my mouth to deny it, then stopped. Lying to him felt pointless. "Yeah." "Good," he replied. I frowned. "Good means you're paying attention." He finally looked at me. "You just can't let it run you." I sat on the lower bunk this time, exhaustion weighing my limbs down. "I don't know how to do that." Marcus studied me for a long moment, long enough that my skin prickled under the attention. Then he spoke, voice low. "You learn who to listen to and who to ignore." "And you?" I asked before I could stop myself. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "You're listening now, aren't you?" That did something to my chest. Something steady, anchoring. The day dragged, then blurred. Work assignments, more noise, more waiting. By the time we were locked back in for the night, my body felt hollowed out. I climbed onto the top bunk again, movements slower this time. Less frantic. Marcus lay back below, hands folded on his chest, staring at the ceiling like he was counting something invisible. "Marcus," I said quietly. "Yeah." "Why help me?" Silence stretched. I wondered if I'd crossed some line. "Because," he said finally, "someone helped me once." That was all. No story. No explanation. The lights dimmed. The cell settled. I lay there listening to the sound of his breathing below me, steady, unbothered. In the dark, with fear still coiled in my gut, but quieter now, I realized something else. I wasn't just surviving the hours anymore. I was learning how to stay. And that felt like the first real step toward not disappearing in this place. By the end of the first week, my body stopped flinching at every sound. That didn't mean I felt safe. It just meant my nerves were learning new limits. The doors still slammed. Men still shouted. Fights broke out 2 tiers down and got dragged away like nothing had happened. But my heart didn't try to escape my chest every time anymore. Marcus noticed before I did. "You're standing different," he said one afternoon, leaning against the bars while I sat on the lower bunk lacing my boots. "Not curled in on yourself so much." I shrugged. "Guess I'm getting tired." "That too," he replied. "But tired people still tense up." "You're not doing that." I didn't know how to answer, so I didn't. The truth was, I'd started measuring the days by small things. By routines. By the fact that when I walked beside Marcus, most eyes slid right past me. Not invisible. Just not worth the trouble. That mattered more than I wanted to admit. Work assignment put us in the laundry room together. Hot, loud, thick with the smell of detergent and sweat. Machines rattled like they were trying to shake themselves apart. I folded sheets while Marcus worked the carts, his movements smooth and practiced. "You ever done this before?" I asked, mostly to fill the noise. He shook his head. "Different joint. Same kind of work. How long you got left?" The question slipped out before I thought better of it. Marcus paused, just for a second. Then he shrugged. "Couple more years, if nothing changes." The number sat heavy between us. A couple of years sounded survivable. 12 had not. "That scares you?" he asked, glancing over. I nodded. "Yeah." He didn't say anything for a while. Just kept working. Then, quietly, "It shouldn't. Time moves whether you fight it or not. Better to learn how to stand in it." I watched him then. Not like a shield, not like protection, but like someone who'd learned a language I was still struggling to understand. There was something grounding in that. Something steady. That night, locked back in the cell, the air felt different. Heavier. Quieter. I lay on the top bunk staring at the ceiling while Marcus sat below, back against the wall, reading an old paperback with a cracked spine. "Marcus," I said after a while. He looked up. "Yeah. Did you ever think about getting out?" The words felt dangerous once they were spoken. He considered me for a long moment, then closed the book and set it aside. "Every day," he said. "Difference is, I don't let it eat me alive anymore." Ow! He leaned his head back against the wall, eyes unfocused. "By making this place smaller than my head, smaller than my past, smaller than who I still am." The cell hummed around us. Distant noise, faint voices, life continuing, boxed in and stubborn. I let his words settle, let them take root somewhere under the fear. For the first time since I'd arrived, I didn't feel like I was waiting to vanish. I felt placed, anchored, even if the anchor was temporary. As the lights dimmed and Marcus's breathing evened out below me, I realized something quietly important. I wasn't just learning how to survive prison. I was learning how to exist inside it without losing myself. And that realization, fragile as it was, felt like the beginning of something I wasn't ready to name yet. The first time someone tested me, Marcus wasn't there. It happened in the yard, late afternoon, when the sun sat low enough to turn everything the color of rust. I was walking back from the pull-up bars, arms burning, mind quieter than usual. I'd started working out because Marcus did, not to get big, just to stop feeling breakable. A guy stepped into my path like it was accidental. Older than me, lean, eyes sharp with boredom. "New kid," he said, looking me over. "You run with someone?" I felt that old instinct flare, panic, the urge to disappear. But something held me in place. Routine, maybe. Or the echo of Marcus's voice telling me fear was useful, not something to obey. I walked back to my cell, I said. Neutral. Flat. He smiled like I'd said something funny. Took half a step closer. "That's so." Before I could answer, another voice cut in. "He's busy." Marcus stood a few feet away, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He hadn't raised his voice. Didn't need to. The guy glanced at him, recalculated, and stepped aside like the whole thing had never mattered. "Keep moving," Marcus said to me. I did. My legs felt steady. That was new. Back in the cell, the adrenaline caught up to me. My hands shook as I sat on the lower bunk, staring at nothing. "You all right?" Marcus said, not asking. "Yeah," I replied, and this time it wasn't a lie. He nodded once. "You handled it." "I didn't do anything." "You didn't fold," he said. "That's something." The compliment, if that's what it was, sat heavier than fear ever had. I realized then that Marcus wasn't just standing next to me. He was teaching me, quietly, how to take up space without daring anyone to challenge it. Days passed like that. Small tests, small wins. I learned when to speak, when to stay silent. Learned how to read the room the way Marcus read everything, without staring, without rushing. One night, locked in after a long day, I stayed on the lower bunk while Marcus took the wall. The cell felt almost familiar, almost lived in. "You won't always need me," he said suddenly. I looked up surprised. "I know." He studied me, eyes steady. "Good." The lights dimmed not long after. The noise softened. I lay back and listened to the building breathe the way I had on the first night, but it sounded different now. Less like a threat, more like weather. Something you learn to live inside. In the quiet, with my body tired and my thoughts finally slowing, I let myself take stock of what had changed. I wasn't brave. Not really. But I wasn't dissolving anymore either. I learned how to stand still without shrinking. How to move without apologizing. How to exist in a place designed to strip you down and leave you empty. And as sleep came, steady and unforced, I understood that this wasn't about becoming hard or fearless. It was about becoming present, about staying, about realizing that even here, even now, I was still myself. Time inside didn't move forward so much as it stacked. Days piled on top of each other until they felt like one long stretch of sameness. Counts, meals, work, lock in. Somewhere in the middle of it, I stopped counting how long I'd been there and started measuring things differently. By how often my shoulders stayed relaxed. By how rarely my heart jumped into my throat. Marcus noticed those things too. He always did. You're not watching the exits anymore, he said one afternoon as we waited for movement. Means your head's not running. I thought about it, then nodded. Didn't even realize. That's how it works, he replied. You stop surviving minute to minute. Start breathing again. It wasn't praise. It wasn't advice. Just an observation. But it settled into me deeper than anything else he'd said so far. The incident happened a few days later. It wasn't loud. No feasts, no shouting. Just tension, thick and sharp. Two guys arguing near the phones, voices low but heated. Everyone nearby pretended not to notice, which somehow made it worse. I felt my body brace on instinct. Marcus stepped half a pace closer to me. Not touching, just close enough that I knew where he was. Eyes forward, he murmured. Not your problem. I did what he said. Kept my gaze neutral, my breathing steady. The argument fizzled out as quickly as it had sparked, the moment passing like it never mattered. My hands didn't shake afterward. That was new. Back in the cell, I sat on the lower bunk, processing the quiet aftermath. I used to think every little thing was about to explode, I said. Marcus leaned against the wall. Most things don't, he answered. Your fear just told you they would. And now you're learning when to listen to it. That distinction felt important. Like a line had finally been drawn. That night, I stayed awake longer than usual. Not from panic, just thought. Marcus lay on his bunk, hands folded, eyes open but distant. Marcus, I said softly. What happens when I don't need you anymore? He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched, comfortable but heavy. Then you'll be fine, he said at last. That's the point. I rolled onto my side, staring down at him in the dim light. And you? He turned his head, just enough to look at me. I'll still be me. The answer wasn't sad. It wasn't dramatic. It was solid, grounded, like everything else about him. As the lights dimmed and the cell eased into its familiar hush, I let my eyes close. There was no rush of fear this time. No counting. No bargaining with myself. Just the steady sense of being exactly where I was, with my edges intact. I understood then that this wasn't about dependency. It never had been. It was about learning how to stand long enough to realize you already could. The first crack showed up on a day that should have been ordinary. It was during work detail, late afternoon, the air thick and stale. I was hauling carts when my name echoed down the corridor. My last name, sharp and official. A guard stood at the end, clipboard in hand. Ale, more. You're done here. My stomach tightened. Nothing good ever followed being singled out. They separated us at the corner. Not rough. Not kind either. Just procedural. Marcus gave me a look. Not warning. Not reassurance. Just steady. Like always. Medical, the guard said. Reassignment review. I sat alone in a plastic chair outside an office that smelled like disinfectant and old paper. My leg bounced before I could stop it. Old habits didn't die clean. Through the thin wall, I heard voices. Low. Muffled. Marcus is among them. Calm. Unyielding. Say my name once. When the door finally opened, it wasn't a doctor who stepped out. It was a caseworker. She didn't smile. More, she said. You're being moved next week. Different housing unit. The words hit wrong. Not panic. Something colder. Displacement. Why? I asked. She shrugged like it was weather. Bed space. You're cleared to transfer. Back in the cell that night, I sat on the lower bunk, hands clasped tight. Marcus leaned against the wall, arms folded, listening without interrupting as I told him. So that's it, I said finally. They just move me. They do, he replied. Silence settled. Heavy. I hated how much it mattered to me. Hated that my throat felt tight. I don't want to start over, I admitted. Marcus's jaw flexed. He looked away for a moment, then back. You're not starting over. It feels like it. That's because you're thinking this place is the point, he said. It's not. The nights after that were quieter than usual. Not because there was less noise, because there was more thinking. I watched Marcus the way I hadn't before. The way he moved. The way he paused before speaking. The way he never filled silence just to escape it. On my last night in the cell, the lights dimmed slower, like the place itself was hesitating. You'll be fine, Marcus said eventually. I know, I replied. And I did. That surprised me. I climbed onto the top bunk one last time, staring at the ceiling that had stopped frightening me weeks ago. My fear wasn't gone, but it wasn't driving anymore. Down below, Marcus lay back, hands folded, breathing steady. The same as the first night. Different in every way. "I'm glad it was you," I said quietly. He didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "Me too." The cell hummed. Doors clanged somewhere far off. Life kept moving. As sleep came, gentle and unforced, I understood what he'd given me wasn't protection. It was orientation. A way to stand. A way to stay myself, even when everything shifted. Tomorrow, I'd move on. But tonight, I was exactly where I needed to be. They moved me before dawn. The tier was half asleep, lights low, voices muted. I packed what little I had, rolled clothes, paperwork folded thin, and stood by the door while a guard checked names. Marcus stayed on his bunk, sitting upright, boots already on. He didn't get up. Didn't need to. "Ready," the guard said. I nodded and stepped into the hall. The door shut behind me with the same sound it always made. This time, it didn't feel like a verdict. The walk to the new unit was longer than I expected. Corridors I hadn't seen yet. Corners that smelled different. Men I didn't recognize. I kept my shoulders loose, my eyes steady. The posture wasn't borrowed anymore. It belonged to me. They opened a new cell and waved me in. Different walls. Same metal. Same hum. My new cellmate glanced up, measured me, then looked away. Neutral. Acceptable. I set my things down and sat on the lower bunk, breathing evenly until the routine swallowed the moment. Later, during movement, I caught myself doing something strange. I was listening, not for threats, for rhythm, for when to move, when to pause, when to let the noise pass through instead of into me. It worked. The day unfolded without incident, like a test I didn't need to study for anymore. That night, locked in and quiet, I lay on my back staring at a ceiling that wasn't familiar yet. The fear came back in pieces, small, manageable. I let it sit without feeding it. That was new too. I thought about Marcus then, about the first night, my hands shaking, about the yard, the laundry room, the way he never filled silence just to make it easier. He hadn't taught me how to be tough. He taught me how to be still. I breathed, slow and even, until the cell felt like a place I could occupy instead of endure. The realization arrived gently, like a hand settling on my shoulder after a long walk. I wasn't less afraid because someone stood beside me anymore. I was less afraid because I knew how to stand on my own. This place would keep testing me. Time would keep stacking. Some days would be heavier than others. But I had orientation now, a way to measure myself against the noise and not disappear. As sleep took hold, steady and earned, I let the thought finish itself without rushing it. I was still here, and that was enough.